The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Welcome to the Cashman Mind, Body, Spirit Show. This will be a very interesting show today. I'm going to review the science of addictions. We're all addicted to something sometime in our lives, whether it's alcohol or cigarettes or sugar, the booger and the hooker, narcotics, gambling, sex, internet. I can go on and on, but to understand why this happens to us when we don't mean for that to happen, and it goes as far back as when we're born. Yes, there can be babies that are born addicted because their mother was smoking and drinking, taking narcotics, while the baby was in the uterus. And the mother, because of what she is taking in, and because the circulation is in common with the baby will become addicted to. It has an undeveloped brain, and if you instead of playing music, so you can get the Mozart effect, and the child will come out playing the piano or the violin like Mozart. Some can seriously come out addicted to nicotine, to narcotics, to alcohol, and it can cause major damage to the infant. It can rewrite the genetic script because it has not been totally written when you're born, and by the activities that the mother and father actually, even sometimes goes to grandparents, what their genetic script has on it from what activities they did can affect the infant. So let's go on the road here so you understand the science, then you're less likely to continue if this is your problem, or maybe avoid these things we speak about completely, and have a normal child, especially the children. I have some books here, How to Raise a Drug-Free Kid. I'll show that to you, and how to what marijuana does to the body. We'll discuss that all in detail. And I just wanted, this is the start of your education, okay? And so the addicted brain. So why do we abuse drugs, alcohol, nicotine, sugar, gambling, sex, internet? I can go on and on. We can about addict ourselves to about anything, but because the reason some of us do that is because we're stressed, and it changes the chemistry of our brain. It creates an amazing amount of pleasure. Creates fantasies, especially if we have problems, and if we intravenously inject ourselves or breathe in, where it quickly goes to the bloodstream. I feel great, I'm wonderful, I'm in heaven, if we forget our troubles. And it can happen to any one of us. It's more likely to happen if there's a history in the family, because your genetic code may be predisposed a bit. Generally, that plays not that big a part, but it does because you've got the genes of your parents, but generally they abuse medications or alcohol or marijuana or a cigarette, so their genetic code is changing yours. And when you are in the uterus, we have at the end of our chromosomes called telomeres. That field is called epigenetics, and that part of the genetic script is not written at conception. In the chromosomes, you have this telomere length, which can be altered by the activities of what's going on around you, what the mother is doing, what the mother and father did, and what their parents did, can rewrite the genetic script so you could be an infant who's underweight, overweight, addicted, may have anomalies. Their genetic code has been altered, may have heart defects, may have liver defects, may be missing an extremity, maybe a brain problem. They can happen from how the genetic script, the telomeres, were written by the parents. So drugs put us in a dreamland, okay? It creates fantasies, and we feel better. And it can happen to all of us. I remember in college, I was under a lot of stress. I had no problem with cigarettes. I never smoked. I had maybe a third of one cigarette, coughed all night, and decided never to do it. My roommate, the same thing. How lucky we were that we never, tried it again. But I remember down in Bloomington going to a bar on Friday or Saturday night to have a drink with music. The music made me feel better. I had a part-time job, and these two big famous chemists would go to the certain bar to listen to the music. And the music made me feel good, but I'd also maybe have one drink. Maybe that's all I could afford, but boy, it made me feel so good. On the way home, the combination of music. But that can get to be a habit. That can get to be a habit. And sometimes I think I had more than one, so I don't encourage you in that at all. But that's why we do it. And so men and women respond differently to different drugs. All of us some of us have a tremendous craving and we can never stop, and other ones can have a drink now and then, no problem. And the same with a narcotic. But many are not built that way anatomically, and they will become addicted to them, and it ruins their lives because they start lying and cheating and stealing, not getting their work done. If you smoke marijuana, for example, you can develop the munchies. You get overweight and you probably become a diabetic. So life goes on. Most people who take these drugs end up having a poor life. They don't have any money. They may even steal. They may abuse their family. And we respond differently at different age groups. The undeveloped brain, the child's brain is not totally developed, and they have found children who become addicted to drugs, which they do. So you got to pay attention to your children. Or if you yourself are abusing them, the kids, of course, are more likely to abuse them. But if there's a divorce or a stress situation, the child's brain becomes addicted a lot easier, especially starting on age 13, and slowly as the years go on. If they're not addicted by age 21, then the addiction rate goes down. Like cigarettes, for example, high school seniors right now, about 20%, maybe 21% or so addicted regularly use marijuana. Cigarettes, maybe 18%, but the effects that will have on their health, the majority will not lead a normal life. They'll look 10, 20 years older than they are because nicotine affects the small vessels, especially in the skin. And I remember giving a lecture on this to high school students, and a young girl said, "Well, do I look older already?" No, she had to wait a bit. But people who smoke regularly can, especially see if they're 40 years old, they'll probably look like they're 60. Maybe that means nothing to you. And some people get away with it, it doesn't show up, but that's very common because nicotine affects the whole body. Every cell is affected by nicotine. It'll affect the vasculatures and increase rates of cancer, lung cancer, for example. But there are 12 other cancers related to nicotine addiction. And drug abuse and addiction is costly. People will spend thousands of dollars. Not that they've got it, they'll go in debt, or if they do have it, they will do very poorly economically. They will destroy their house. You walk into a smoker's house, and you can smell it right away. No one's going to buy that house. I remember visiting in the Boston area a family, my cousin, German like me, we lived our childhood there. He wanted to meet the neighbor, the most elegant couple. They had good jobs, engineering jobs, man and wife. But as you walk in their house, you could smell the smoke, secondary smoke. And that in itself, because it's unpleasant, but I breathe it in, it can affect me. I went back to visit my cousin, I think 2 years later. Those two beautiful, very intelligent people were dead. All due to what? Because of this. They could not find other ways to have pleasure in their life. The Psychiatric Association has what's called the DSM INTR. That is the classification of different stages of drug addiction. Okay, they'll have one for drug use, where you use it occasionally, but you don't take it regularly. Then there's another class for drug abuse, where you're starting to steal pain medication, maybe that your parents are using, for example. Then we have the addicted brain, for example. And there's some debate is depend on dependence or addiction. The two definitions sometimes difficult to keep apart. Yeah. So addiction or dependence is more serious and includes more of a loss of control over drug seeking and drug taking in spite of distress or negative consequences. That's addiction dependence, where you continue to do it in spite of negative things. You're not going to work. You're abusing your family. And then that's a clinication of addiction or dependence. So what is a drug? Well, there are about 7 classes of drugs. Let me review them with you just a little bit. We could talk all day about them, but just some idea. Club drugs, okay? Ketamine, also known as K. MDMA, also known as E. Rohypnol, also known as roofies. These are all subclasses of club drugs. Cocaine, which is also known as candy, C, and blow. Okay. Crack, another form of cocaine, and also known as freebase, rooster, tornado. Yeah. Then another class, hallucinogens, which include LSD, mescaline, also called cactus, also known as Mexican mushrooms, heroin, which is a lot stronger yet, also known as Big H, China, white smack. Then we have inhalants, which include air blast, huffing, moon gas. Then we have marijuana, which is the most common abused drug. And unfortunately, politics is getting hold of it and is spreading throughout the United States. And they will tell you that they're taxing it, and the states are making a lot of money. I tell you, the ones that did it first, like Oregon, Colorado, they're losing money. Mm-hmm. They're losing money. And they establish stores, and what it says in the packages, they're actually lying about it. There's a lot more THC in it than it says on the package. And they do that on purpose so that you might become addicted. That stimulates a cannabinoid system in your body, which is a system they're designed to make you feel good. Unfortunately, it's a straight path to addiction, and you got to have it every day. And especially children who smoke marijuana, they now many times go into addiction with heavier drugs. It's the start. And it's spreading. Even New Jersey, I read recently, they are not going to be, I think there's a vote coming up where they will be allowed to sell their products to New York, because New York State does not have a marijuana law yet, which you know probably will be coming. There's too much money involved. And I'm concerned about Indiana. I even wrote a book on it a few years ago. It's coming. It's when these companies bribe the politicians big enough, they'll approve it. Unfortunately, the state, because we're surrounded by states where marijuana now is improved. Do we want to have a marijuana nation? I'm not for that, where people will be sitting on the street corner smoking their marijuana in a face. And a lot of these people have more addictions than just marijuana. There'll be cigarettes, there'll be alcohol. Before you know it, they're not working. They're on disability. The rest of us are working to try to earn the money to keep the nation afloat. This is reality, okay? Then we have methamphetamines, and also prescription drugs concern you, like OxyContin, Ritalin, different drugs. OxyContin, the Purdue company not Purdue University, in New York, a small company, the owners made billions upon billions amount of money addicting us. I remember OxyContin sales lady coming to see me years ago, and I am so glad that I did not fall for her spiel on why I should prescribe that as a pain medication. Also, the company was very smart. They hired the most beautiful ladies, sales ladies, to come by and sell it to you, and they'd be leaning forwards while they're talking to you. I went through all that, and I did not fall for her. and I still have some hormones left, so it's really not funny. They've lost big lawsuits, I think $40 billion recently, but it's not enough. None of the people that made billions off of these drugs are in jail. Not a one of them. And that it could only happen to me. I was at the Pierre Hotel in New York City a couple of years ago, and I was looking down at the buildings below me. I was high up, and someone told me later I was looking at the OxyContin building where one of the family members lived. Yeah, I mean, I really followed that slowly. I don't know how anyone could, in good conscience, want to make $1 while providing medications which can kill you or maim you. I realize some people may have advanced cancer or something, and they may need to take some of these medications. That's fine. But there are other drugs available too. But I notice the local hospitals here are still using it. I think what harmed people the most here is the 0 to 10 rule, that they essentially made it malpractice. The patient, what's the level of your pain? It's a 9. And if you didn't give them a heavy drug, you could be pulled up in front of a committee. Yeah. Who promoted the 0-10 rule? It was the Purdue company. It was a cancer doctor from New York, actually, who was working for them. But now they may use the 0-10 rule, but it's kind of optional. You don't have to give them. You need to talk to the patient and see if it's stress or addiction or what it is. So, and different drugs, behave differently. So let's go a little further on this trip. Where do drugs work? I think this is something important to know. Is that even a glass of alcohol or nicotine or OxyContin, there is in your brain, near the front, near the bottom, is called the nucleus accumbens. The size, 1 millimeter in size. Yeah, they proved it through scanning now, and that in it secretes dopamine. That's a chemical, okay? Dopamine. And this chemical can put you in a high like that. It's connected to many other parts of the brain too. But a cigarette will do it. A drink of alcohol will do it. Believe me, it's happened to me. I don't drink hardly any alcohol at all. I recommend no alcohol, but a glass of wine now and then. I don't even recommend that, but I do have one now and then, and there's no question. It interferes with your judgment. It makes you feel better because it's secreting dopamine in there. And it's connected to a nucleus further back in your brainstem, which secretes serotonin. Now that also is chemicals which kind of relax you, okay? But it doesn't give you that quick high. It's dopamine that gives you the quick high. And after a while, the thing that you're taking doesn't work as good. So you get to take more of it. And that's called tolerance, which all of us develop if we take a drug often enough, long enough. Addiction is due to repeated drug use. Just using it once, most people don't get addicted, okay? Which it could be. But repeated use is the path to addiction, and you will develop tolerance and dependence and you get to take more and more and more because it just doesn't work anymore. And only way to turn that around, don't take it anymore. But there are medications that can be helpful, but the best way to turn this around is stop taking it. Now, and it may take 3 months to a year till you return to normal. Alcohol is a lot quicker, 3 months maybe. But even one drink, bango, you're drinking again, okay? Marijuana is the most abused drug today, okay? Alcohol and nicotine, millions are addicted to that. Why do people take drugs? Because a rush of pleasure sensation. I feel good. The stressful life is not like this. Even myself, who I feel fairly lucky, it's like this. That's the way life is. And we have to develop methods ourselves to relax. What are ways of doing it? We use drugs to escape to another world. You know, I read a book every 3 days. My basement's got thousands of books in it because I teach wellness and I find it fascinating. But you know, on occasion I wonder, am I using that to escape the real world? Because as a neurosurgeon, believe me, my life was like a great result. Speak to another patient, you're going to die because of accident. Alcohol, I saw many people who, the results from drinking too much alcohol. Alcohol affects every cell in your body, but especially the liver. A lot of people die from cirrhosis, but I'll tell you one thing it does, it destroys brain cells. Very quietly it does that. I saw patients, they had to take blood clots out of their head, okay? Where the brain was this much off the skull, I swear to God. Yet, they kind of had functional lives. Their brain slowly dropped down, shrunk, and even shifted to the other side, and a very slight injury, and get a little bit of a headache. I do a scan, you wouldn't believe what I'd see. The blood clot wouldn't be solid blood clots. They have been dissolved. It's black blood, very low pressure. I drained that, maybe saved their life, but their brain would never totally return to normal. I'd scan them 6 months later and the brain was still that far off the skull because the brain is gone. Alcohol will destroy brain cells, okay, because it can cause a lot of damage to the liver, cause fatty liver, which can lead to diabetes, very common. It'll make fatty pancreas, which kills the insulin, become diabetic. And then fibers form in the liver, and it forms cirrhosis, and that can kill the liver. And people die from that, some at a fairly young age. But a lot of times it takes its time. But because the brain isn't working right, a lot of people drink a lot of alcohol, abusive to their family. Yes, they're beating up on their wives and their children and stealing things. And if I look at a serious accident, odds of some alcohol being in the blood of that person, probably 40%. 40%. You can imagine the hurt the other person, and if they don't kill them, for example, or they kill them, the lawsuits involved. If you weren't broke to begin with, which you may be because you're alcoholic, they take all the possessions away from you. You're going to be poor if you're poor already. Other reasons that people have addictive behavior is peer pressure. Kids, all their friends are smoking. I remember that in high school, there'd be groups together. They were all smokers, and then there were the non-smokers. They couldn't stand to smell their clothes, and they didn't want to get into the habit. So it can be peer pressure can do it. If the parents are smoking, odds of increase the kids are smoking. Okay, so persisting use leads to addictions. So then you start missing school and stealing to get money so that you can have your drug. So heredity play a small part. It does change your gene structures because the alcohol, cigarettes, any type of addiction affects the telomeres, the end of your chromosomes, and it's writing a genetic script. If you want to learn more about epigenetics, go on YouTube. I did a show like this on it recently. But now, actually, we have developed the science enough that we can look at MRI scans, CT scans, and where we inject some sugar, because sugar is used in metabolism, and we can see parts of the brain that are being affected by alcohol and drugs. And we can demonstrate it and prove it on a scan. Yeah, PET scans are particularly good. So we have a craving for these drugs, because as the drug level drops, we don't produce the right dopamine, serotonin, the right emotions, and we want to get the high back, we take the drug again. This is the danger. So many people have relapses. Some may have just quit like that for a while, but the first temptation, have a drink or light up marijuana or a cigarette, and they're often running all over again. And that's why a lot of times it's best never to touch that again. We see the kids a lot today. You wouldn't believe this. You would think they were benign. They're addicted to the internet. They cross the street and go in front of me while I'm driving, and they're totally unconscious. I saw a boy and a girl at a coffee shop, Starbucks, recently, sitting opposite of me. You could tell they were totally in another world. They were totally oblivious to their surroundings. They were totally concentrating on this artificial world they have created through texting websites, as quite common. And how are these messages sent? What are the ABCs of drug addiction? It comes down to the nerve cell. The neurotransmitters jump from the axon of a nerve that sends the message to the dendrite, but there's a space in there, okay? And there's a synapse, so the axon has to send these molecules over to the dendrite to send the message. They're little round balls. They come in vesicles. They've seen them now with the electron microscope. I've looked at them myself. And that could be 1,000 little tiny balls in this tiny little thing covered with a membrane, and it goes into the synapse like dopamine, for example, to make you feel good. And then if it's not degraded, if you don't have the enzyme to degrade the dopamine, you'll feel good for a long time. You can feel good for a long time. But over time, those enzymes don't work as good. And because of that, you will need to take more. You'll need to take more of the drug, the alcohol or whatever, to make you feel bad. Just like my molecules, I'm speaking so much, my voice is going away. Besides, that feels better. Besides this morning, I played pickleball. I got a lot of exercise, and I suspect I lost a bunch of water. I drank some coffee, but I did not have a glass of water and replace the fluids that I lost. So I think I'll have a little more. Oh, that feels good. So there are many different neurotransmitters that send messages. We get dopamine and serotonin, and then we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, the acetylcholine from the parasympathetic, which relaxes us, and then the stressor, the adrenaline, the epinephrine secreted by our pituitary. In our brain, remember I spoke about the nucleus accumbens, and where the serotonin is made, they're all interconnected through molecules. But they are influenced by the limbic system further up in the brain, okay? That can send a message to the hypothalamus, which helps regulate some of your blood sugars or some of your fats, and it will in turn send messages, CRH, for example, to the pituitary gland, which in turn sends messages down to your adrenal gland in your body, and it does it through nerves and hormones. Hormones can be messengers and affect the whole body. That's the reason hormones are created. So how you think has tremendous effect, not just on your brain, but your whole body, because it sends messages, relaxers, stressors, hormones, nerves, and so our brain is extremely complex, and so the many different neurotransmitters. How does cocaine work? It also secretes some dopamine to make us feel good, but it affects the acetylcholine receptors in the body quite a bit, and which are relaxers. Okay, morphine chemicals produces enkephalins and endorphins that make us feel good. Okay, the morphine is not really a pain reliever. It just makes us, our brain think, I don't care if I have this pain. Okay, so interesting, morphine affects our emotions. And if you were to smoke a cocaine inhaler, for example, it is rapidly absorbed in the alveoli of your lungs, and in 1 minute you'd feel better, less than a minute, okay? So if you use it intranasally, it works slower. So it depends a bit on how we use the things. Let me tell you something interesting too. Cigarettes, we still have, around 1910, 1920 or so, they could only addict 15, 18% of the people to cigarettes. It affected sales. It upset these companies. And you know what they found out, which a lot of people do not know, but I now know. I knew it already, but I had confirmed in one of Gary Taubes' books, one of his original books, he has a whole chapter on it, is that they added sugar to the tobacco leaf. It comes already about 50% sugar in the tobacco leaf, okay? But it needs to be dried, okay? So they put it over heat, and they dry it out, and then they take it and they put it in molasses, because the heating reduces 50% sugar to 20%, and once you soak it in molasses for a while, the sugar level goes up again. And as you smoke, this smoke, which is naturally alkalinic, makes you cough a lot. That's what must have happened to me, because I couldn't smoke. And thank God. But if you make it acidic with sugar in it, that opens up the alveoli, and the nicotine can get into the blood system a lot quicker. Cigarettes have sugar in them, and I'm not certain which is more addictive, nicotine or sugar. That hasn't been discussed a lot, but it kind of makes you wonder, okay? Read the chapter in Gary Taubes, or just look on the internet. But I knew that before I read that, but it's not well known. And so when they approve, like, e-cigarettes for children, they don't bring that up. They don't bring that up. It's the sugar in the cigarettes that's addicting these kids, so they will continue and buy more. Yeah. So don't allow that in your children. And The cocaine so stimulates the brain. It makes us feel good. But then as you have withdrawal, the blood level goes down. You go down into depression. And so it's up and down. And this damage accumulates over time, okay? And we will develop some tolerance where the liver works faster. It puts out more chemicals to try to heal you, but the drug's not working. So you take more and more, and you're developing dependency and tolerance. Remember, we spoke about epigenetic changes that in the histones and the methyl groups in the substance that you're taking affects the genetic expression. And remember the baby, if you get bad habits and you're drinking and smoking and you're rewriting the genetic code of the infant within you. So why are drugs so powerful? Okay, well, they enter the brain and they dominate the neurotransmitters, the messengers in our brain that tell us what's going on. They dominate them and affect us. That's what it is. The bad ones are much more common than the good ones. And the brain has no good mechanism to fight this, okay? And we spoke about all these interconnections of the brain from the limbic system, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the hormones and nerves, to the adrenal glands, which put out epinephrine, cortisone, that affect our appetite and make us feel good and bad and alert, for example. So dopamine is affected by food. Yeah. So animals affected by these neurotransmitters also by drugs. They've done a lot of experiments on animals, especially rats, to prove some of these scientific theories. Yeah, an animal, and I watch the bird feeders and animals in the morning every day while I'm reading, and they're right in front of me, from deer to woodchucks to everything. Yeah. To rabbits, frogs, foxes. I'm watching the whole thing, and I see how nicely most of them actually are treating each other. Occasionally, a hawk comes in and grabs one, but I see a lot more love than conflict. And so food makes them feel good. Animals worry just about three things: eating, reproducing, staying alive. That's the basic part of our brain too. We have developed a frontal lobe on top of that. We think too. We think of the future. And an animal thinks mainly of today, this second, or right now, not tomorrow or next month or next year. Okay, so our brain is developed differently. And and we already mentioned the age of drug use starting. The children's brains have not fully developed. It's a lot easier to addict a child to nicotine or alcohol. So you've got to pay attention to your children, okay? And a good book is How to Raise a Drug-Free Child by Joseph Califano. I like to hold this up. This is an excellent book to read. I think if you still have kids at home, I think that this is just the greatest. And he's full of tips for parents, okay? And for example, drug addiction and eating, he says, and I found this in my lifetime of age 39 for 46 years now, okay, is that, you know what a good one is? I stopped doing it after a while because I got too busy, but to eat meals with your children, at least dinner or breakfast, at least one of them, where you have them all around the table and you talk to them and you ask them how things go in school. Are your friends smoking? How's your work going? This is a wonderful thing to do. And Califano speaks about that. Put the kids around a table once a day. I did that for a long time. And I asked them, what's going on, Jeff? What's going on, Heidi? And how you doing in school? It projects love, and you find out, are your friends smoking marijuana, for example? You can ask direct questions. I think this I think, a very good one and a very good book to read, How to Raise a Drug-Free Child by Joseph Califano. You can go on Amazon or you can go to the library here and get the book. Gambling, too, it can be an addiction. And I know some people myself. One is kind of a friend I play tennis with. And I don't know for certain. I never asked him point blank. But I do think that he's addicted to gambling because he lives in another state. He wants to meet up with me always where there's a gambling joint. And I see him going over there using the machines. I think he's an addicted gambler. And once that's set in you, it's tough to get rid of but it can break you. You can lose a fortune like that. I remember having gone to Monte Carlo, actually, with my wife and another friend, and I see them playing cards, and I watched them lose 3 hands in a row, and I thought, can't lose all the time, so I did put a little money down. On the fourth one, won $1,000. I immediately took it down the street and bought me some fancy clothes. But I didn't gamble again the whole time I was in Monte Carlo, kind of interesting little story. So sugar is really one of the more addictive things that we have to face every day because we have to eat. I teach people how to stop, reverse diabetes. I do a half-hour show on that every 2 weeks. I coming up shortly. But sugar is addictive. It releases dopamine. If you walk by a donut shop, even I'm pretty resistant to sugary foods, but I think you've had the right stressful day, and I look at the donuts, I might buy one, I might eat one. So it's in our body, has been put there by nature. But years ago, we'd have bad food, it was seasonal, so it never really bothered the people. But now we're the processed food business, and it's available all the time. You just get down the street, there you are. To put a little humor into a bad situation, though I never had anybody bring it up, but all the McDonald's in Russia were closed down, have left the country. How lucky they are, because they will not be dominating their diets with processed food. I'm using that as an example. There are many other fast food places that sell processed food, which is full of bad fats, full of sugary products. High fructose corn syrup is in all of them, which are very unhealthy things. So sugar stimulates the dopamine center and the serotonin letter, and you feel real good. But then the insulin is secreted, pushes the sugar level down, takes it out of the circulation. It may push it way down. I'm hungry again. This is how the brain works. So be careful what you eat. Maybe watch one of my YouTube shows on the keto way, eating good fats, not so much sugar, and you'd be a lot healthier. And remember, there's sugar in cigarettes, and alcohol really is a form of sugar. And if you drink and eat a meal, the alcohol is generally processed first. The liver processes it before it gets to your meal. So your sugar level in your blood stays up for longer, which can cause damage, in your body. So how can you get over an addiction? Stop using it. That's one way, but that's not as easy as that. Some of them are so severe. So let's use an example here. There are many different ways, okay? But one is not to use it. But the Alcoholics Anonymous formed about 1935, and it was Dr. Bob, June 10, 50, and it's a birth of an organization called Alcoholics Anonymous. Began as a fellowship for those who had hit bottom, and he offered support, friendship, alcohol-free social structure as a positive substitute for the destructive call of alcohol. Mm-hmm. There's so many people out there with this problem. Then he wrote a book called The Big Book. So anybody joins the organization, he encourages people to read the book. I did read it. And then they follow about 13 steps. And I'd like to read those to you. I don't know if we'll get totally through them, but you can get this in the library or Amazon. And it's one way. We admitted we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. Well, it will be the same with narcotics. Maybe it could be the internet. Maybe you've become an abusive person. Come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. They feel so impaired, they feel nothing else could help. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. So that respects all religions, okay? Even with no religion, I think you can admit there's some power around in the world. Well, throw the power off to that. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, honest to ourselves, okay? And admitted to this power above us, God, whatever, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs, okay? Say it to another person, say it to whatever power you believe in. We're entirely ready to have that power, or God, remove all these defects of our character. I want to get rid of them. Okay? Humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. What are we doing? We're stealing, we're being abusive. Humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Make a list of all the people we had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. Who did our behavior harm? Maybe our children, maybe our neighbors, maybe our employer, whatever. And that to the best of your ability, that you will make amends with Him. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Okay? Continue to take a personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. So in the future, if you feel you did something wrong with your addiction, that you fix it like that. Sort through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our spirit, God, as we understand Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Okay? Some relationship to a power of spirit that's higher than us, which we all have. Something's running this universe. Okay? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry the message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in our affairs. That's who we are. We readily admit that we're addicted to something, but we're doing something about it. No, can't drink alcohol because I might said something else. No, I can't have a cigarette because I can't gamble anymore, for example. But you have to be open about it. It's a disease. It's not your moral failing. Okay, so I think that's that's doable. The other ways too. Some people reduce the dose over time. Some take a medication, for example. Many different methods that you can read about. Some are personal counseling, for example, and some do it. And I know somebody stopped heavy drinking. One day he said no more, and by golly, they did stop it. But remember, the hormones are still there, and I know that person. That person started. Remember, the neurotransmitters now are not getting hit by that alcohol, and they're empty, and the substitutes were not healthy one. That person brought in sugar, and this perfectly thin person now is getting bigger and has developed type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. That's very common. That's very common. So you got to have a substitute, like, Dr. Cashman, what do you do to relax? Remember I told you, maybe my reading is my drug, okay? I do walk in nature every day, even bad weather, with occasional exception. And I whistle to the birds and they follow me, yes. Remember I wake up in the morning when I'm reading and all the animals are out there. And even the woodchuck, been living under my house 22 years. I come outside, he shows me his teeth, he's smiling at me. And he sees other people in my family, and he goes underneath the house, and my house is still standing. Actually, I read that if a woodchuck doesn't destroy the house in 2 or 3 days, there'll not be a problem. He said a wife and kids sent, so I don't know. But he came from hibernation out the other day, and the geese are out there sitting on eggs already, and I got 2 ducks that come eat my corn. So I do relate to nature, and I take about a 45-minute walk around lake back of my house and down the street and another lake up there. But I'm looking at the leaves and the trees, and I've learned a lot about trees and nature and flowers. So try to, and I'll have a few songs. Yeah, Oh, What a Beautiful Day, for example, is a song I sing regularly, okay? If I Ruled the World is one I'm memorizing right now. So you got to have other ways of relaxing. We all have stresses. Life is stress, and it has a beginning and it has an end. But if we could say live to be 100 and be happy and whistling and look young, I know enough about nutrition that if you have good habits, eat right, exercise, learn to keep stress controlled, and relate to nature, plants, animals too, and humans, you can have a wonderful life and be happy, and be happy till the last day, and you'll miss 20, 30 years of disability, mental problem, physical problems. The majority of that, over 90%, can be avoided. Follow me on YouTube, radio, or see me in person. Go on the internet. You can find me, Cashman diabetes.com, and how to get rid of it because so many diseases are attached to it. And how you think is extremely critical. Bring happiness into your life. It doesn't matter whether you're rich, poor. You can be poor as can be and be the happiest person in the world. Start singing a song. Change your telomeres by bringing music in your life. Maybe take up tap dancing like I do. So maybe I'll play pickleball with you or tap dance with you when I'm 100. Thanks for watching my show. Bye-bye. Love you.